Those who drive cars have to abide by certain laws to assure road safety, and the same goes for bikers. Now, the larger public might be unaware, but most countries have pretty strict laws for cyclists as well. If we're being honest, some of these laws are pretty crazy, but you should still be aware of them. That's why we're going to list the weirdest cycling laws from around the world today. First off, Missouri cyclists are required to have a flag attached to their cycles. Back in 2016, Missouri lawmaker Representative John Houghton introduced a law that required cyclists to keep a 15-foot tall fluorescent flag attached to their cycle if they're riding on county roads. According to John White, a tandem bike coordinator with Springfield Spring Bike Bicycling Club, this idea was the dumbest in a long time. In his opinion, highly visible clothing and awareness would do the job just fine, as a 15-foot flag could cause safety hazards in crosswinds. Spring Bike President Steve Rapper agreed that the flag's just not feasible from a cycling perspective, given that it's taller than an 18-wheeler. He posed a question to Houghton, asking him what his rationale was behind the bill. While the lawmaker understood that it might sound unreasonable, he believed that it was the best way to handle the safety of people in the county, as they were concerned about road safety given that their roads have no shoulders, sharp curves, or steep hills. Additionally, he thought that the bill didn't restrict cyclists' freedom on the road, it just made the entire process safer, even though the cycling community agreed otherwise. Next up, the UK fines speedy cyclists. You wouldn't expect your speed on a cycle to be dangerously fast, maybe ever, but if you're in the United Kingdom, except Ireland, you may want to reconsider. While there aren't any speeding laws specifically catering to cycles, the traffic police don't appreciate bicyclists who cross the limits set down for motor vehicles. Therefore, the authorities expect everyone to be aware of the highway code, no matter what their mode of transportation is. Cyclists can be fined not only for violating paths or pavements, which is a separate issue, but also for speeding on roads in royal parks. Such an incident took place in 2013 when a teenager was reportedly fined for cycling at 37 miles per hour in Richmond Park. When it comes to speed specifically, a cyclist was fined in 1997 for traveling through the city center at 25 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. The fine was carried out on the basis of a law from 1847 where riding furiously was illegal. In this case, the cyclist wasn't even pedaling furiously, but he still had to pay 120 pounds for cycling at a dangerous speed. Therefore, even if there aren't any set laws, you're advised not to turn into Vin Diesel when you board your cycle. Moving on, Dallas has a couple of issues with cyclists. It's hard for cyclists in Dallas, where they have a range of laws that curtail the freedom of those who prefer two wheels over four. First off, they're not allowed to take their cycles with them inside public buildings. Now, they didn't think to specify the kind of building when they made this law, because it left locals confused about whether all buildings were banned or if it's just government-run public buildings. What about people who ride their bikes to work every day and don't want them to get stolen? Other than that, it's illegal to do any stunts or tricks using your cycle. You can't participate in a race of any sort as well. Bottom line, you just can't have fun with your bike, and that's a bummer, especially for kids, as learning new tricks on your cycle is one of the best parts about riding it for the first time in your life. And if you're wondering how the county could fine kids, they won't. They're going to fine the parents or guardians of the child that commits such illegal activity instead. What's more, South Dakota bill has people walking more than cycling. Traditionally, right-of-way laws prioritize more vulnerable travelers. But South Dakota's House Bill 1073 flips that idea and puts cyclists at a disadvantage. According to this law, if a car approaches a cyclist within a no-passing zone without at least a 3-foot wide road shoulder, the cyclist shall stop the bicycle, move the bicycle off the roadway, and allow a faster vehicle to pass. That's right, if a car tries to pass you, you must stop, dismount, and walk your bike past the vehicle. This bill also takes away cyclists' right to take lanes without shoulders. But more than that, it leaves a lot of unanswered questions about other situations, such as, do you have to come to a complete stop if another cyclist passes you? Is it necessary for a slow-moving tractor to come to a halt to allow a fast cyclist to pass? If you're riding in a group, but in this scenario, can you even join a group ride? What about animals? Would you spook a horse if you passed back? The bottom line is that this bill's pretty rash and unreasonable and uncovers some deeply unsettling anti-cyclist sentiments amongst lawmakers in several states of America, not to mention New South Wales' hefty enforcement of bells. Calling for every cycle to have a bell on it seems pretty normal, quite standard you might even say. It only ensures the safety of the cyclist and others present on the road, but is it necessary for it to be a law? Locals who use cycles as a mode of daily commute don't think it's extremely necessary to have a bell on their two-wheeled vehicles, as their own voice can do just as much. And anyway, no cyclist ever sped away dangerously fast in traffic. What really ticked them off, though, was the obscene amount of fines charged to those who don't comply with this law. And if this wasn't enough, the government issued a fine worth more than $400 for riding dangerously, except they conveniently forgot to mention what this dangerous riding constitutes. According to avid cyclists, these laws just make alternate commuting options difficult for locals, which leads them to wonder if the government really even cares about making the lives of their people easier. Who would have thought multiple governments across the world would have issues with cycles? Now for California. If you're planning on going to the pool, don't take your bike. These kinds of specific laws instinctively make you wonder what scenario brought them about, and while it may seem unreasonably weird, it actually makes sense. The law's been around since the 70s, when BMX riding and skateboarding were really popular with teenagers. During fall and winter time, the younger crowds would break into swimming pools and use them as a substitute for cycling and skating rinks. The downside was that since they weren't built for that purpose, the misuse made them dangerous. However, it still raises a bigger question about the lack of ease and accessibility people should have to certain sports, even if it was just for fun. Perhaps if the city was made to be a bit more friendly for cyclists, they wouldn't go to such drastic measures in order to enjoy a hobby. Coming to a slightly crazier one, Thailand doesn't appreciate shirtless cyclists. Most probably prompted by tourists being themselves, Thailand introduced a bill forbidding people from riding cycles while being shirtless. One would wonder what prompted them to think this was necessary. Maybe it's meant to keep cyclists safe from injuries, as a direct impact with roads and gravel would be pretty painful. But in case you're vacationing during the summertime and it's awfully hot, you can afford to break the law. It only costs $5 and might be the most affordable fine on our list. Let's look at Arizona's law against gargling on a cycle. On the list of absurd laws, this has to be somewhere in the top 10. Lawmakers in Peridot, Arizona are a dentist nightmare. They're not fans of oral hygiene. Jokes aside, this law calls for zero gargling on roads if you're aboard a cycle. But does that mean you're allowed to gargle on other vehicles? Perhaps in a car or a truck, you can empty spit out into a cup. But if you're gargling away on a cycle, you're going to have to spit on the road, and the velocity might make it reach some unsuspecting pedestrian or fellow cyclist. When you look at it this way, it seems reasonable to make this a law. However, one question remains: how big of an issue was this in Peridot, given that they went and introduced a law about it? Last but not least, Connecticut doesn't allow superhuman cycling. This law is just confusing. Who was cycling on the roads of Connecticut at 65 miles per hour for them to make it illegal? And more importantly, is that person a pro cyclist yet or not? It would make more sense for the limit to be one that can actually be broken instead of an inhumane speed, as we don't see the need for a law that can't be broken. And that's all for this video, guys. What's the weirdest cycling law from this list? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.